Hello everybody, my name is Chapman and I have to say I'm feeling really good right now. That said, I wasn't feeling really good up until about 2 days ago. For about 2 or 3 weeks I was in a really low spot and it happens from time to time. I am much better now at recognising the signs. I see a therapist and she teaches me techniques of how to kind of avoid it and how to challenge it when it happens. But still, once every sort of 6 months or so, maybe a couple of times a year, sometimes a little bit more regularly, I feel quite bad. And it just so happened that a few days ago when I started to feel better, I read an article about how male suicide is the second biggest killer in the UK. And it really resonated with me. I just thought, you know, I've come out of this and I'm starting to feel better, but there are so many people who are stuck in it that I just felt like I had to talk about it. One of the things this article said, and again, it's an area that needs so much more attention and so much more research into it. One of the things this article was suggesting is that men don't talk about their feelings much and they don't like to admit if they have a problem, again in quotation marks. And I'm making this video really purely because I have an audience and I can make it and I want to share it, you know? Like, there is nothing for me to admit, there's nothing for me to be ashamed of. I'm talking about it openly and honestly and frankly. So I've never spoken about this anywhere before really, for two reasons. One, I like my channel to be a happy-go-lucky place and I like people to come along to my content and learn something or have a laugh or whatever. But also, I guess I didn't want anyone to know, which is totally the wrong attitude to have, and that's kind of the reason I'm making this video, because imagine if there are other people out there who don't want other people to know, who haven't got the support network that I have. It's no wonder that people can spiral and it can get out of hand and you can just you find yourself going down a deep, dark hole. So I feel like I have to talk about it, and it is no different. Like, I've got a bad knee and I've mentioned my bad knee on numerous occasions and I see someone about it. I also have some pretty less than helpful thoughts sometimes, and I see someone about that, and there's no reason for me to not share that as well. One thing I'm really conscious of doing this video is giving advice. I don't want to be giving advice. I'm not qualified to do it. And also, it's so unique to every person that what I do to challenge my thoughts and feelings are the opposite of what someone else should do. I actually spoke at length yesterday with my therapist. Her name's Alexis, to kind of get the tone of this video as right as I could. And she said to me, yeah, avoid giving advice at all costs, but put links to like as many resources as you can so people can start looking around and find things. She also mentioned something that I found actually really interesting, that therapists are like driving instructors. Just because you don't gel with your driving instructor doesn't mean they're a bad instructor, doesn't mean you're a bad driver. It took my wife, for example, 4 instructors until she passed her test. And the same thing is true with therapists. If you don't gel with your therapist or they don't get you to begin with, don't be disheartened and don't lose hope, because there are so many more out there who will get you. You know, they'll listen to you and they'll understand you in a slightly different way. And it's what she said to me, so many people try it once and it doesn't work for them and they give up hope. And I really don't want that to be the case. So I guess I should give you some context. And in fact, I asked Alexis to give sort of a one-liner, a description of what she would say about me if asked by somebody else. Because, like I said, everything's so unique and every person deals with things in different ways. She's not really into diagnosing someone with depression or anxiety or something. That's part of it, but it's a much sort of more individualistic approach. So here's what she said about me. To all intents and purposes, life is fine, but you have some behavior and thought processes from traumatic childhood experiences which make you close in. So what she means by that is my life's pretty good. I have a really lovely existence, actually. I've got a very loving family around me. My 2 big sisters, my twin brother, my mum are all really supportive. My wife loves me unconditionally. I live in a nice house. I've got money now. I never used to, and now I've got money. Like, everything looks perfect. And actually, that's something I felt really guilty about for a while. I really struggled when I felt bad, because I was like, what right do I have to feel shit? Because there are people out there who are living on the breadline, who don't have a loving family around them. And as much as you try to rationalize that, my mind doesn't care, and it does what it does regardless. But there are 2 things I kind of want to mention about that. One, I'm not a victim in any way. I had some traumatic experiences when I was a kid, but so do so many other people. And I'm not sharing this story to kind of be a sob story. In fact, it's totally the opposite. I want it to be positive and uplifting, and I want to talk about how you can challenge everything. And two, having a traumatic child experience is not a mental health trump card. You know, you don't need to have had that to think things in certain ways. You know, there are lots of people out there whose childhood was sort of rainbows and gumdrops growing up, but that's not what it's about. It could be anything. It could be something you heard on a TV show, or it could be something your dad said to you once in a really loving way that you've just sort of internalized and taken on a slightly different meaning. And it affects the way your mind works and the way you process thoughts for the rest of your life unless you start challenging it. So I'm going to tell you my story now, but I just really want you to bear in mind that even though my childhood had its issues, I was actually very happy for the most part. And if you're not feeling so good for any reason, you don't have to have had some sort of experience in your past to make that the case. You could have had a pretty happy childhood, but you could still feel this way. So when I was growing up, my household was pretty intense. There was an atmosphere most of the time, and I think as a kid you pick up on that regardless of whether it's in front of you or not. So my dad was domestically violent to my mum frequently, regularly and often. And although they tried to keep it from their children, my mum in particular tried to hide it from my sisters and myself and my brother, you can't hide the atmosphere. She was scared of him, and he would fly off the handle at nothing. And a few times I actually witnessed him attack her. Little things like I remember being in the car with him, and he'd threatened to sort of drive the car into a tree and kill us all because my mum had said something to offend him. My dad had MS, and he wasn't very well, and I think he kind of, rather than sort of dealing with the problem, I think it made him angry and insecure maybe, and he would take it out on my mum. And also my sisters to a degree. He never beat them, but he was unpleasant to them very often. My brother and I, he was actually much kinder to. I think he wanted boys, and was kinder to us. But as a kid, you pick up on that stuff. And I remember being in the car with him when it was just me, him and my brother, when the divorce was going through, and he would drive us to the pub super quick, drink all day, get hammered, and then drive us back all over the road. And he was just a very scary person to be near. And as a child, you pick up on these things. And my strategy to stay safe, to stay out of harm's way, was to get really busy. I used to draw all the time. If I wasn't drawing, I'd be writing something. I would be playing games. I'd just be trying to kind of stay out of harm's way, because the more visible I was, the more chance there was of me, one, kind of picking up on things. If my mind was busy, I would be elsewhere, would try not to sort of soak up the atmosphere. But two, if I was visible, I never knew what would happen. Sometimes my dad would be lovely to me, sometimes he would be very short. And after seeing the way he behaved with my mum and my sisters, you know, it was really unpredictable, and that's hard as a kid. Now, I grew up with that as kind of my default approach. I'm busy all the time, because the minute I'm not busy, my thoughts catch up with me and I start to feel really trapped. I didn't notice it really until I left school, because when you're at school, part of my thing is that I have to constantly be moving forward and progressing. And when you're at school, that's the case. You're going from year to year, you're going from exam to exam, you're going from GCSEs to A-levels to a degree. It wasn't until I came out of the education system and got a real job that things started to catch up with me. And my jobs were fine. If you're that way inclined, they were decent jobs. I was working 9 to 5, doing data entry, working in insurance, working for the magistrate's court. And they were decent jobs, paid all right, you know. But for me, I felt trapped because there was no progression, there was no moving forward. So I would turn up, I would do my time, I'd go home, I would be really sad, I would make my lunch for the next day, I'd go to bed, and I would just repeat. And I did that for a couple of years until I found what I'm doing now. And it got really bad. My mum bought me antidepressants, and I didn't know that there was an issue. I thought actually that I just get sad sometimes, it happens, I'll come out of it. And I think that's part of the issue. When you start internalizing things and believing it's who you are, not what you do, that's a really bad thing. And it wasn't until I started speaking to Alexis that I found out that actually it is a behavior I do. It's the way my mind works. It doesn't have to be that way. If I challenge them and I realize that that isn't who I am, it's just a thing I do, it's the way I cope. And sometimes it can work out in my favor. For example, like I wouldn't be where I am in my career if I didn't have a little bit of that pushing me forward and making me drive. But when it's cranked up to like a 9, 10, that's when it gets unhealthy for me and when it freaks me out. So doing the job I do now is amazing in that I have control over things and I can see progression, I can see things moving. It's also really terrifying because, again, for the last couple of weeks I've been feeling really bad, had a quiet spell and there was no work coming in, and suddenly I think, oh my God, where am I going? What do I do next? And it really throws me off kilter. So the things I have to do to kind of like right myself again are to learn to take time off. And when I start feeling the beginnings of the spiral, I have to really work on not letting it take hold. And it's not easy. Well, it is easy in theory. All you have to do is go, no, I'm not going to think that way. But actually, in practice, that's very hard. And even now, I've been seeing a therapist for about 5 years and it still gets me. Like the last couple of weeks were pretty low. But it happens much less frequently now and I'm much more in control of it. And even when it does happen, I know objectively that it's not real and that I will come out of it. And I think for lots of people who don't seek help, are too shy or scared or worried that they're going to get sort of stigmatized or something, I can see how that will spiral and get worse and worse and worse because you don't have the tools yet to realize that you're just in a state and it will come out. So that is all I have to say. I really hope that if you have watched this video and you feel in any way, whether you be young, old, male, female, non-binary, I really hope that it's maybe given you a bit of confidence to say something, because what a waste to live your life. The amount of time I've wasted of my life feeling shit when I don't need to, it's so awful. Again, I put links to stuff down below so you can check it all out. Obviously I see a therapist, but you know, there are things on the NHS, there are things all over the place for you to look at. I find it so sad that people live their lives feeling a certain way when actually they don't need to. The world is beautiful and there's so much to offer. And yes, I go through little stages here and there, but now I've been doing this for a while, I know that I will come out of it. And it's just really sad to think that the people that won't. So I really hope this helped and have a good day. Bye-bye.